Hey, welcome to this edition of Tuesday Talks with Twyla. Today we are going to talk about self-discovery. So if you've seen some of my posts about my upcoming webinar, I do a Rediscover the New You webinar every other Thursday. And my program is called Rediscover Yourself. And the rediscovery and self-discovery piece of my programs is really multifaceted. So I want to talk about this a little bit because I ran across information recently that was kind of a light bulb moment. And not just do we need to figure out where we are now, so go through that self-discovery process, right? And figure out what we are thinking about, what we're doing every day, why we're doing those things, what we feel on a regular basis, and what feelings we avoid at all costs. And the other part of this, so once you kind of figure all of that self-discovery out, is understanding how that's impacting your life, because we don't realize how much of all of that is just on autopilot, right? So we just think the thoughts that we think, and we just do the things that we do. And some of the behaviors that we have are things that we just do on autopilot, right? If you've ever changed jobs and all of a sudden you find yourself halfway driving to your old job, that's just one of those things that are ingrained in our mind, right? And then there's habits like having a glass of wine or a beer as soon as we get home from work so that we can, handle the evening, and going to the cabinet and grabbing a cookie when we're really not hungry, we're just bored. And understanding all of these different things. But part of the self-discovery process is how we identify ourselves. So this is key, right? And I don't really love the word identity. I just feel like, okay, my identity is what's on my driver's license, right? It's who I am. But also who I am can be associated with our roles in life, right? So I'm a mother. I was a daughter. My parents are passed away. I'm a sister. And then your roles at work, right? So if you're a doctor or a nurse or a teacher or, any of those recognizable occupations, our brains like to identify with that because we can create a picture in our mind. And when we identify ourselves as those things, when those things change, sometimes our self-identity gets rattled, right? We kind of lose sight of, who am I now? Who am I if I'm no longer a daughter? Well, I'm still a sister and a mother and a wife, but that's not like who I am inside. That's just a role I play in my life. And when I was doing some research on the self-identity and kind of the discovery and self-exploration and self-image, that's one too that I feel like we associate with a picture, right? It's how we see ourselves, and I imagine it as that. It's the image, right? It's a picture. It's how we picture ourselves, which I associate with more of a physical appearance, as well as how other people see us. So what do they see in us, right? And sometimes that's our physical appearance, right? Our shape, our size, how we're dressed, if we have our hair done, if we have our makeup on, that part of it, that visual image, the external. But without realizing it, we also imagine what they see in us. They see us as those roles we associate with. They see us as the nurse because we're wearing scrubs. They see us as the teacher because they see us at the school. However that like self-image is created, that's really only part of it, right? So the inside, not just the self-image. So as I was doing all of this research, there's all these ways to describe this. So your self-discovery, the figuring out of the self, is part self-image, it's part self-concept, it's part, the word, I just lost it, self-worth, that's one I really don't like. How we value ourselves, how much worth we have. So there's all these ways to define the self. And there's, when you look this up, there is a lot of different things that are words that we use to kind of define ourselves. If you're trying to figure out like this piece of it, self-image, self-concept, self-worth. But my programs start with self-awareness. So we're trying to figure out who we are right now. And the aha moment that I had the other day was that, you know, part of what we do is we definitely want to imagine something different. We want to imagine our ideal future self, and then we want to work towards change, transformation, evolving, enhancing. You know, we want to make things better. We want to change and make it better. But we have to take the moment to acknowledge and accept where we are right now. So the self-discovery piece is figuring that out. And sometimes that can be very tricky because sometimes there's just things there that we don't want to see. We don't want to admit. We don't want to notice. Maybe we know it's there, but we hide it. And some of this has to do with some emotional judgment that we do. So this was a big one when I ran across this. I mean, just the two words, emotional judgment, and what we do, what that means to us, to ourself, I think is significant. But the process of the self-discovery is what's needed to know what's there now and why it's there. That's part of my process, because understanding the why, sometimes we feel like we just, you know, it's not useful to know the why, but sometimes it is. And what I like to draw out of the why is the piece where we can find the strengths, the growth, the skills, right? So the why has to do with a life experience, something that has happened in our life that has shaped us, that has grown us, that has taught us. And that's inside of us. That's who we are today. That's part of who we are. Now, sometimes these things aren't positive, right? We take something from our past that is maybe a negative thing that somebody said to us, somebody that we loved, somebody that helped raise us or was an influence in our life. And we heard that so many times that we started to believe it. So understanding where that comes from can be helpful. But we have to find it all. We have to explore it all. And we have to be kind and compassionate through this process, because we don't want emotional judgment. We don't want opinions or judgment or beating ourselves up or putting ourselves down. We don't want any of that. And what happens when we do that is that's when those things hide, and they hide deep, and then we can't find them. But if we don't find them, what happens is those are the things that will derail us once we try to look to our future and set goals and decide what we want in our life. And so we want to make sure that we're exploring all of it and understanding the importance of it and coming to it with kindness and compassion so that we can find it all. And what this might look like is, like I said, the thoughts that we think every day, the stories that we tell ourselves. And those in and of themselves can be very tricky, right? I have been paying super close attention to this. And even as a coach, when you know the tools and you know what to look for, it can be very tricky, right? And sometimes I have to start with the behavior, with the action. What am I doing and why am I doing this? Or why am I not doing that? I want to do that. Why am I not doing that? And I think that is my biggest obstacle in my life, is trying to motivate myself. And so when we ask the questions about what we're thinking about, what we're feeling, or what we're avoiding feeling, and when it comes to the feelings, like what comes up for us, typically you'll find that your actions will be significantly impacted by feelings of fear or scarcity or shame. Those are some of the ones that have a very significant impact on our lives and our actions. So understanding those feelings, because we're probably not taking the time to feel them, right? I mean, we're not just like, okay, today we're going to feel shame, bring it on, and we just allow it. We don't do that. In fact, we avoid it, right? When something triggers or brings up those feelings of fear or scarcity or shame, we don't jump in head first, right? We avoid, we buffer, we find activities to distract ourselves. We don't allow, when it comes up, the emotions. And we might have emotions then that aren't as significant, that are more common, that come out. So we might have anger, bursts of anger, frustration, and there might be an underlying feeling of hurt or loss or sorrow, sadness. So understanding those, what little bit does come up, what we do allow for whatever amount of time, where they come from, what the thoughts are behind them, and the actions that we take, our behaviors, our habits, the physical part of the acting out or not, and understanding the relationship between these three things are everything. Because what we think is what creates the feeling in our body. So our bodies are designed to match the emotion to the thought. So it's automatic. We don't have to think about it. So before we had maybe a bubble up of an emotion, there was a thought there. So sometimes we have to get very curious and explore that and get, in there deep to find out what that is. So our thoughts create our feelings, and based on how we're feeling is how we will act. So my favorite way to describe this is when you show up to, let's say, a situation where your kids had chores, they were supposed to get it done and they didn't. You come home, there's two ways you can handle it, right? If you come in with frustration and anger, you're going to have a completely different conversation than coming in with curiosity and compassion, right? You imagine just the words that you say, the way that you say it, the tone of your voice, maybe the posture that you carry, all of that. And if you're a mom and you have kids, you've probably experienced this on both sides of the spectrum. So how we feel impacts how we act. And understanding all of this just in our everyday life, getting through this self-discovery of all of these different facets, so that we have a complete picture of who we are today and why and what it is. What are the thoughts? What are the feelings? What are the actions? How do I show up every day? Do I do everything that I say I'm going to do? Do I do everything I want to do? Do I set a schedule? Do I set mini goals or intentions? Am I intentional about any of that? Or do I wake up and say, okay, I have to set my alarm at this time. I have to be to work by this time. I'm going to come home at this time. We'll have supper. I don't know what else we'll do. Or I do have, this to do tonight. And then I'll go to bed at whatever time. So you can imagine that type of life as opposed to my alarm goes off at this time. I go walk for 30 minutes. I have coffee for 30 minutes. I get ready for work. I show up at work. I'm going to work on this for this hour. I'm going to work on that for that hour. Whatever structure you have there. I go to lunch at this time. I come back at this time. I have this call. I have this meeting. I end my day at this time. I'm going to be intentional by I'm going to go take a short little walk outside and get some fresh air. I'm going to maybe go to the gym at that time. I got to stop at the store and get these 3 things. And then I'm going to go home. I'm going to cook supper right away. We're going to eat supper. And then we're going to, go, take the kids to the park. We're going to go, it's too cold out. We're going to play games. And we know exactly what we're going to do. And it's an intentional plan for the day. So understanding the full components of the self-discovery is figuring out all of these pieces, all of these things about what life looks like for us today. It is the complete discovery of ourselves. So it's not just a few questions here or there. It's a complete deep dive into the self-discovery. And then it's acknowledging that and accepting it. This is where I am today. Because the resistance to it is certainly not going to serve us. It's not going to be a motivating factor to create the change that we want, right? If we're beating ourselves up, oh, look, I'm lazy. I didn't, I claim I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week. I haven't went in 3 weeks. Whatever that is, that negative self-talk or that putting ourselves down, the emotional judgment, the opinions, all of that is not going to help us change where we are today. And understanding that this self-discovery is part of our identity today, who we identify ourselves as, how we look at ourselves, our self-concept, our structures and beliefs, and our self-worth and our values, and all of those different things are made up of who we are today. And part of that are things that we don't think about in a conscious way. We don't make a conscious decision about it. We just either kind of know that it's there, kind of know that's part of who we are, but we're not real intentional about it, and we're not choosing that to be exactly what we want it to be today. And I think that's part of the battle, right? Is just not even knowing how we are identifying ourselves. And that self-identity is, I just feel like it's kind of this harsh label, and it doesn't have to be. Our self-concept or our structures, our belief structures and our values and what we believe in, all of those things that are part of us, some of them come from childhood, come from significant life experiences, come from a work environment that was toxic or unhealthy, comes from friendships that were unhealthy, relationships in general that were unhealthy. And it's amazing how much of an impact those things can have on us. And then we take them on for ourselves, and they become part of our identity. They become part of who we are. So if you ask yourself the question, who am I? I think that one's hard, because like the first thing that I come up with when I did this work myself, like, who am I? My name comes up, right? This is who I am. Like if somebody walked up to you at a party, it's like, oh, who are you? Well, you don't say I'm someone who works out 3 times a week. I keep my own schedule, and I'm diligent about doing what I say I'm going to do. And my values are, that's not how we answer that question, right? Who am I is Twyla Hofrogge. And what I do is a life coach. But that's not who I am. That's not who I am inside. So defining that and exploring that is part of this work, so that we can answer the question, maybe not who am I, because I feel like that's our name and title. So maybe what might resonate for you is, what am I? What characteristics do I have? What qualities do I have? What values do I have? What beliefs do I have? And why are they important to me? And are they important to me? So one of the ways to think about this is, if you know someone that's like you've defined as outdoorsy, right? A fisherman or a hunter, or someone who's just like, that's kind of like their, I don't want to say life mission, but like their life is built around that, right? They work and then they do this other hobby. And so you kind of define them that way. They're outdoorsy. They love to be outdoors. They're outdoors anytime they possibly can be. Or if someone has a hobby that is a significant time commitment in their life, like someone might be a runner. And when you think about these things, right, like the way that you kind of identify those qualities or characteristics in other people, you recognize that in your relationship of how that shapes their life. If somebody goes to the gym all the time, if that's, just it's a non-negotiable in their life, that's a priority for them. We recognize those things in other people. And so that is what we can use to try to help answer those questions for ourselves. What are those things for ourselves? And what are our values? What do we want to make as our top priorities in our life? I think what happens by default is based on the amount of time we spend doing things, our priorities end up being based on that. So if you looked at your life, you might say, well, her priority was work because she spent so much time at work. But really, her value, her priority was her kids and her spouse, her family. Her number one priority in what she thought about, cared about, was passionate about, what she felt inside of her as her highest priority and biggest value was her commitment to family. So sometimes these are hard to find. Sometimes we feel like we're not aligned with our values because of the amount of time we're allowed to spend there, the quality of time that we spend there. I mean, that's something to think about, right? So for anybody that has a full-time job, you likely spend more time at your job than you do with your kids. And so, especially if they're active, you get home, let's say you get home 5:30 at night, and in that span, kids should generally be to bed by, let's say, 9 or 10. So you maybe have 4 or 5 hours with them. Well, you've already spent 8 or 9 hours by the time you commute and get there, at your job. And in that 4 or 5 hours, you have to cook supper, check on homework, maybe run to activities, attend activities, go to practice, whatever that is. And so it looks like it's not a priority. So what is the quality of that time that we do spend, that we do have? We can make that important and an important priority and value in our life because we make sure the quality, that our presence is always at the highest quality in the time that we do have. So that's a great way to look at it. But understanding what those values are for ourselves and what we want them to be and how we want our life to be every day, that's what we get to look at. And as we explore some of the self-discovery things, we might find things that it's like, I don't want that in my life at all. Or I didn't find any of this in my life and I really want it there. And so that's part of that self-discovery process, is figuring out everything that we have now, who we are now, what our self-concept is, what our self-image is, just doing a complete deep dive in our self-discovery. And then the next part is where we get to decide all of it, every single piece. And we build out what that looks like. We do a self-exploration. We do it's basically just this quest for self-fulfillment, satisfaction, and joy, excitement, all the things you want in your life, right? And it's a process of, I was trying to find the right words, right? Like, so the words I came up with were like innovation, optimization, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here. And one of them that I came up with is there's this self-actualization. It's kind of a mouthful. So self-actualization is where we have the realization of one's full potential. So it's like, I just imagine this being like a finish line. Like, we've arrived, here we've done it all, we've got it all, we've done it all, we've realized everything, our full potential. It's the end of the road, it's like the bookend, And I was like, no, that's not what this is. This is a constant path of innovation, optimization, evolution, because you don't actually just arrive and stop at the finish line or get to the end of the path, right? I mean, even if you're hiking and you get to the end of the path, you have to turn around and go back. You can't just stop and stay there. You have to go somewhere else. And this process is that, because as we evolve and change and set our goals, set our intentions, and achieve those goals, we will evolve as a person, as who we are. Our self-concept will change, our self-image will change, our self will change. And we won't just be done. My best analogy of this that I heard a few weeks ago was, it's not like you're hungry and then you eat and then you never have to eat again, right? I mean, you eat, you get hungry again, you eat, you get hungry again. And setting goals and intentions in our lives and creating a optimized life includes a continual process. And I think the only thing that's different as we go through this process over and over, if you're just starting this process, you're going to start with your self-discovery, the self-awareness, all of the exploration process of where you are right now. You have to go through all of that process. But as you do the work and you get through that acknowledgement and acceptance, and you start to transform your life and evolve, and you get to continue to look forward, you don't have to spend as much time with who you are now, because you know who you are. You've created it. So it becomes a more efficient, more effective process of growth, of transformation, of evolving, innovating, optimizing. And when you look up those definitions, I mean, I think the optimization was my favorite, because you're always optimizing if you're taking where you're at and making it more efficient, more effective, and you optimize it, you're making it optimal, but it's a constant forward movement. And you don't have to spend as much time in the self-discovery phase, because you know who that is. Now, there might be some things that slip through the cracks, or that we didn't identify, or some kind of an influence or something that happened on your journey where you do have to spend some time with that self-discovery piece, getting to know that part of you again. Maybe you latched onto some belief somewhere that maybe had some relevance to a past belief or a past experience, and you just by human nature latched onto that, and it's not serving you, and you have to discover that and find it and work through that. But it's going to be minimal. It's not going to be the work that we do in the very beginning, this massive discovery process. It will, be more familiar because you're creating it as you go. So I just think that's like such an optimistic look at this journey, and understanding how important the self-discovery piece is, and that it has all these different facets to it, and how we can just constantly discover things about ourselves by just becoming very curious about, why do I do this? Why do I think that? What am I thinking? What am I feeling right now? How many times do you ask yourself that? I mean, there's times where I'm just irritated or frustrated, and I'm just like, and I just stop and I say, I am so frustrated right now. I am so annoyed at everything on the planet. And then I'll just ask myself, why? Why am I so annoyed? Like, I don't even know why I'm so annoyed. I just know I'm annoyed. I feel the vibration in my body of annoyance, and everything around me triggers an annoying feeling. And inevitably, when I do that, when I stop and acknowledge and allow and get curious, it makes it better. Everything on the planet is no longer a trigger, and I'm able to work through that. So the self-discovery piece is all of this. It's the thoughts, it's the feelings, it's the actions, it's the behaviors, it's the habits, the missing habits, why we're not doing the habits, why we're not doing the things we want to do. It's all of that. So when we talk about self-discovery, keep all of this in mind. Get curious about some of this stuff, because this will be the key to the change that you want to see in your life. Because you have to know, acknowledge, and accept that it's there and it is the way it is right now before we can make the change. And there's a lot more to this, right? The self-concept, the self-beliefs that we have that are, significant or have been there a long time, they have a significant impact and we believe them, right? I mean, there's a lot of that that's just, it feels like it's part of us. But one of the things that I ran across today was that self-concept, so the construct of all of the, like who we are, spiritually, physically, socially, emotionally, like all of that self-concept, which includes self-esteem, self-image, self-awareness, all of that, like our self-concept is learned. It's not inherent. That's huge. So if our self-concept is learned, it's learned from the way we were raised, the way our parents talked to us, the way people treated us, things that were said to us, beliefs that we latched onto, things that we brought with us into adulthood. Maybe, again, it was a work environment, maybe it was a friend group. Whatever has influenced your self-concept, it was learned. That's so significant. Because that means if it was learned, it can be relearned. It can be learned as something different. It's not inherent to who you are or what you are. And you can pick what it is. If it's learned, your self-concept can be created to be whatever you want it to be. Your self-image, your self-esteem, your self-awareness, you get to create all of that. And that's what we do as life coaches. We help you through this process, because once we figure out and do the self-discovery, the rest of it all is creating what you want in your life, creating the results that you want, creating the life that you want, creating the feelings in life that you want, being fulfilled, feeling joyful, feeling excited about life, feeling like you have purpose or meaning, all of that. That's what's on the other side. And it's all choice, it's all options, and it's all available to us. The first step is self-discovery. That's what we're talking about today. That's what we do in my program. If you want to do this as a deep dive, Thursday night, we're going to do a webinar, Rediscover the New You, where we jump into this and we do some exercises to get the juices flowing and we start getting into this work. And we do the self-exploration, we do some future looking. It's kind of a mini version of the whole rediscover yourself process. So you can join me Thursday night. The registration link I will drop in the comments so that you guys have it handy, and be more aware of your self-discovery, all the things that make up the self, and get curious about that as you go through your days and weeks, as you notice things. Just get curious about it, build your awareness around it, and make sure that you're having that kindness and compassion, because some of this stuff something might surprise you. There might be some hidden stuff that comes up as you start working through stuff. So as always, kindness and compassion through all of it. So as you're working through your self-discovery process, if you have any questions, you get stuck or something comes up at any time, absolutely reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. Until next week, I will see you on the rediscovery process. Bye-bye.